Single mother helps lost little girl in the rain without knowing she's the daughter of a powerful man. Rachel Thompson never imagined that rainy Thursday afternoon would change her life forever. She worked as a house cleaner in 3 different homes to support her 8-year-old daughter and was on her way back when she spotted the child alone in the park. The little girl couldn't have been more than 3 years old, crying desperately under a tree, her beige dress completely soaked by the heavy rain pouring over New York City. Rachel stopped immediately, opened her old umbrella, and approached slowly. "Hi, sweetheart. Where's your mommy?" Rachel asked, crouching to the girl's height. The child only sobbed harder, shivering from the cold. Rachel took off her own jacket and wrapped it around the little one, picking her up without hesitation. "It's okay, darling. Aunt Rachel will help you, all right?" She looked around for any frantic adult, but the park was practically empty because of the storm. The few people passing by were rushing to take shelter. Rachel's heart ached at the sight of such a small, helpless child. As a mother, she knew exactly the desperation the parents must have been feeling at that moment. "What's your name, sweetie?" She tried again, drying the girl's tears with her own sleeve. "Sophie. Sophie Grace," the child murmured between sobs. "Sophie Grace, what a beautiful name. And where's your daddy and mommy?" The little girl only cried harder, clinging to Rachel's neck as if she were her only salvation in the world. Rachel made a quick decision. She couldn't leave the child in the rain, and there didn't seem to be anyone looking for her nearby. She would take the girl home and try to find her parents. Her house was just 3 blocks away, in a modest neighborhood in Queens. It was a small 2-room place she shared with her daughter Emily, but at least they had a roof over their heads and dry clothes. On the way, Sophie Grace calmed down a little, but kept shivering. Rachel spoke softly to her, trying to reassure her. "You know what we're going to do? We'll take a warm bath and then have some hot chocolate. How does that sound?" The girl nodded timidly, still holding on to Rachel's neck. When they got home, Emily was doing her math homework at the kitchen table. She was a smart and responsible girl who had learned early to take care of herself while her mother worked. "Mum, who's that?" Emily asked, curious but not showing any jealousy. "This is Sophie Grace. She got lost in the rain and is going to stay with us until we find her parents, okay?" Emily nodded understandingly. She was used to her mother's nurturing nature. Rachel always helped those in need, even when she had so little herself. Rachel took Sophie Grace to the bathroom and gave her a warm bath, dressing her in one of Emily's old t-shirts that fit like a dress on the smaller child. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. While preparing hot chocolate for both girls, Rachel tried to talk more with Sophie Grace. "Do you remember where you live, sweetheart?" "Big house," the girl said, stirring her chocolate with a small spoon. "Big house like what?" "Very big. Has a pool and lots of stairs." Rachel found it odd. If the family was well off, how had the child ended up alone in the park? She decided to call emergency services, but the line was jammed due to the storm, which had knocked out several antennas across the city. "And your daddy, what's he like?" she continued. "Daddy is handsome, wears suits, but he's always sad," Sophie Grace whispered, as if sharing a secret. "Why is he sad?" "Because of the mean aunt. She yells at Daddy a lot." Rachel felt a chill. Something about this story wasn't right. A 3-year-old child doesn't just get lost in a distant park without explanation. Emily approached and began playing with Sophie Grace, showing her some simple toys. It was touching to see how the older girl cared for the younger one with genuine affection. "Mom, can she sleep in my bed tonight?" Emily asked. "Of course, sweetheart. But tomorrow morning, we'll try to find her parents." That night, Rachel barely slept. Sophie Grace had terrible nightmares, waking up several times screaming, "I don't want to go!" and "Mean Auntie, no!" Rachel soothed her with lullabies she used to sing to Emily when she was little. There was something very wrong with this child's situation, and Rachel felt it wasn't just a case of someone getting lost. The next morning, Friday, Rachel decided to skip work to resolve the situation. She called her employers, explaining she had a family emergency. "Sophie Grace, do you remember your daddy's full name?" she asked during breakfast. "Richard," the little girl replied, biting into a piece of buttered bread. "Richard what? What's his last name?" "I don't know." Sophie Grace shrugged. It was a very common name. It would be nearly impossible to find the father with just that information. Rachel dressed in her best clothes and took Sophie Grace to the nearest police station. The place was packed with people reporting problems caused by the storm the night before. There was a long line of desperate parents searching for their children, and the situation was chaotic. Rachel decided to come back later when it might be less busy. On the way back, she stopped at the grocery store to pick up a few things for lunch. Mr. Wilson, the owner, was well known in the neighborhood and always knew the latest news. "Rachel, did you see those fancy cars driving around since yesterday?" Mr. Wilson commented while ringing up her items. "Fancy cars? Yeah. Black sedans with tinted windows. Kind of weird for our neighborhood, right?" Rachel felt a chill in her stomach. She glanced at Sophie Grace, who was distracted by the candy display near the register. Were they looking for something? Seems like it. Mrs. Jenkins said a man in a suit came to her house asking about a child. She thought it was strange because he didn't say which child or give any details. Rachel's heart raced. Some maternal instinct warned her there was danger involved. They hurried home. Rachel locked the door and closed all the curtains, instructing Emily not to answer the door for anyone. "Sophie Grace, are you afraid of someone?" Rachel asked, crouching to the little girl's level. "I'm scared of the mean auntie," Sophie Grace whispered. "Who's the mean auntie?" "The lady who lives in our house. She yells at Daddy and says I'm annoying." Rachel began to understand. There was likely a stepmother in the picture, and the family situation wasn't good. "And yesterday, who were you with when you got lost?" "The new driver. He said he was taking me home, but he stopped somewhere else. I ran away." Rachel's blood ran cold. This child hadn't gotten lost. Someone had tried to take her somewhere, and she had managed to escape. Around noon, Rachel was preparing lunch when she heard a firm knock at the door. The tone didn't sound like a neighbor. "Who is it?" she asked without opening. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm a private detective. I'm looking for a missing child," a man's voice said from the other side. Rachel looked at Sophie Grace, who turned pale and hid behind the couch. "No, Auntie, I don't want to go," the little girl whispered, trembling. "What kind of child?" Rachel asked, keeping the door closed. "A 3-year-old girl, light hair, wearing a beige dress yesterday. The parents are desperate." Rachel noticed the man knew far too many specific details, and Sophie Grace was clearly terrified. "I'm sorry, but I haven't seen any child like that," Rachel lied. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "There's a generous reward for anyone who brings information." "I'm sure there is." There was silence on the other side of the door, then footsteps walking away. Rachel waited a few minutes before peeking through the window. A black sedan was parked on the corner. Sophie Grace remained hidden, crying softly. Rachel picked her up and carried her to the bedroom. "Sweetheart, do you know that man who was at the door?" "I think so. He sometimes comes to our house. The mean aunt likes him." Rachel felt she was in the middle of something very complicated. She decided to call her sister Jessica, who worked as a social worker and might be able to offer some guidance. "Jessica, I need your help urgently," Rachel said when her sister answered. "What happened?" Rachel explained the whole situation, from finding Sophie Grace in the rain to the suspicious visit that morning. "Rachel, this is very serious. It sounds like the child is caught in a complicated family dispute. Don't hand her over to anyone without official documents and authorities present, understand? But what if I'm making a mistake? What if her parents are truly desperate? If this were a simple case of a lost child, they would have gone straight to the police station, not hired private detectives to search neighborhoods. Something's not right here." Jessica promised to make some discreet inquiries and call back in a few hours. That afternoon, Rachel kept the children inside. Emily, always sharp, sensed something was wrong. "Mum, is Sophie Grace in danger?" she asked when the younger girl was asleep. "Maybe, sweetheart. That's why we need to be careful." "Can she stay with us forever?" Rachel smiled sadly. Emily's innocent question touched her heart. In just one day, Sophie Grace had already found a special place in their little family. She has a family, Emily. We'll help her find the right people who truly love her. Later that afternoon, there were 2 more attempts with people knocking at the door. Rachel didn't answer either. At 5 o'clock, Jessica called back. "Rachel, I have some information. There is indeed a wealthy family here in New York City with a missing child. The father's name is Richard Harrison Brooks, owner of several construction businesses." Rachel's heart raced. But there's more. Apparently, there's a legal battle between him and his second wife over custody of the daughter and inheritance. The first wife passed away 2 years ago. So Sophie Grace really is his daughter. It seems so. But Rachel, from what I've found, the father is desperately searching for his daughter. It was the stepmother who hired the private detectives. There are suspicions she's trying to use the child as leverage. Rachel felt lost. How could she know who was telling the truth? "What do I do, Jessica?" "I'll try to reach the father directly through official channels. In the meantime, keep the girl safe. If anyone shows up, always ask for documents and a social worker's presence." That night, Rachel could barely eat dinner. The responsibility of caring for Sophie Grace weighed heavily on her shoulders, but at the same time, she felt a protective love growing for the girl. Sophie Grace had adapted surprisingly well. She played with Emily, helped set the table, and even tried to help Rachel in the kitchen. She was a sweet and affectionate child, nothing like what one would expect from someone spoiled by wealth. "Aunt Rachel, can I call you Mommy?" Sophie Grace asked at bedtime. Rachel's heart broke. The little girl clearly missed maternal love. "You can call me Aunt Rachel for now, sweetheart, but know that Aunt loves you very much. I love you too, and Emily too." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On Saturday morning, Rachel was woken by the sound of cars stopping in front of the house. She looked out the window and saw 3 black sedans, with several men in suits getting out. Her heart raced. She quickly woke the girls and took them to the back room. "Emily, grab Jessica's phone and stay here with Sophie Grace. Don't leave for any reason." The knocks on the door were firm and authoritative. "Mrs. Rachel Thompson, open the door. We are lawyers representing the Harrison Brooks family." Rachel took a deep breath and answered, keeping the door only slightly ajar. "I have a court order to retrieve the minor Sophie Grace Harrison Brooks," said a well-dressed man, holding up some papers. "I want to see the documents properly, and I want a social worker present," Rachel demanded. "Ma'am, you are committing kidnapping. Hand over the child immediately or we will call the authorities." "Go ahead," Rachel replied, closing the door. She knew she was taking a risk, but something didn't seem right. If this were truly legal, why weren't there any officials with them? The men stayed outside, making threats for nearly an hour. Rachel called Jessica, who promised to arrive as quickly as possible with a social worker. Finally, the cars left, but Rachel knew they would return. "Auntie, I'm scared," Sophie Grace said, clinging to Rachel's leg. "I know, sweetheart, but Auntie will protect you, okay?" Around noon, Jessica arrived with an official social worker and 2 representatives from Child Protective Services. "Rachel, the situation is very complicated," Jessica explained. "There really is a legal dispute. The biological father is desperate, but the stepmother obtained some questionable court orders. The social worker, a mature woman named Heather, spoke gently to Sophie Grace. "Sweetheart, do you want to see your daddy?" "I do," Sophie Grace answered immediately. "And the aunt who lives in your house?" Sophie Grace shook her head vigorously. "I don't like her. She yells and says Daddy shouldn't love me." Heather exchanged meaningful glances with Jessica. "Rachel, we'll need to take Sophie Grace to a temporary shelter while the legal situation is resolved. It's the safest thing for her right now." Rachel's heart broke, but she knew it was the right thing. "Can I visit her?" "Of course." "And Sophie Grace, did you like staying with Aunt Rachel?" "I loved it. She sings to me and makes hot chocolate. Can I come back?" "We'll see, sweetheart." Rachel helped pack Sophie Grace's few belongings into a bag. The little girl cried, clinging to her. Don't worry, my love, Auntie will visit you all the time, okay? Promise? I promise. Emily was also crying, hugging her new little friend. Will you come back to play with me? Emily asked. I will, Sophie Grace promised. After they took Sophie Grace away, the house felt strangely silent. Rachel and Emily sat on the couch, missing the sweet presence of the little girl. Mom, will she be okay? Emily asked. I hope so, sweetheart. On Monday, Jessica called with news. Rachel, I spoke to Sophie Grace's father. He wants to meet you. Why? To thank you, and to talk about the situation. It seems he really is a good person being manipulated by his wife. Rachel hesitated. She still didn't fully trust the situation. Can you come with me? She asked Jessica. Okay. On Tuesday, they met in a neutral office with social workers present. Richard Harrison Brooks was a man around 40, well-dressed but looking tired and worn. Mrs. Thompson, I have no words to thank you for what you did for my daughter, he said, emotional. Any mother would do the same, Rachel replied simply. Unfortunately, not everyone would. You risked a lot to protect Sophie Grace. Richard explained the situation. After losing his first wife, he had remarried out of loneliness. The second wife, Victoria, had shown her true character only after the marriage. She sees Sophie Grace as an obstacle to inheriting my assets. She's been manipulating and blackmailing me constantly. Why don't you leave her? Asked Rachel. She threatens to take Sophie Grace away from me. She has expensive lawyers and knows influential people. I was afraid of losing my daughter for good. Rachel felt sorry for the man. She could see the genuine love he had for his daughter. And how did Sophie Grace end up in the park? Victoria hired a new driver, claiming the old one had quit. In reality, she fired him. The new driver was supposed to take Sophie Grace to a place where Victoria could find her and play the hero. But why? To force me to sign some documents transferring part of my assets to her in exchange for better protecting Sophie Grace in the future. Rachel was stunned by the level of manipulation. But Sophie Grace managed to escape the car and ran until she reached the park where you found her. It was the best thing that could have happened. What happens now? With your help, I've gathered proof of Victoria's manipulation. My lawyers are preparing the divorce and filing for full custody of Sophie Grace. Richard paused, looking directly at Rachel. Mrs. Thompson, Sophie Grace hasn't stopped talking about you and Emily. She says she wants to go back to the aunt's house where they sing. Rachel smiled, moved. She's a very special little girl. I'd like to make a proposal. While I sort out all this legal mess, which could take months, would you officially take care of Sophie Grace? I'd pay a monthly amount and cover all expenses. Rachel was surprised. I don't need payment. I took care of her because you have a good heart. But I insist. You've had expenses, missed work, risked yourself for a child you didn't even know. It's the least I can do. Jessica nudged Rachel discreetly. Besides, Richard continued, Sophie Grace needs emotional stability right now. It's clear she feels safe with you. Rachel thought of Emily, who had asked several times when Sophie Grace would return. Can I think about it? Of course, but know it would give me great peace of mind. I've seen your character through what you've done. That night, Rachel talked to Emily about the proposal. Really, Mom? Sophie Grace can come live with us? It would be temporary, sweetheart, until her father sorts out his problems. But I'd love that. She's like a little sister. Rachel had felt it too. Sophie Grace had fit naturally into their family, filling a void she hadn't even known existed. On Thursday, she called Richard to accept the proposal. Thank you, Rachel. You can't imagine the weight you've lifted from my shoulders. When can Sophie Grace come? Tomorrow, if you're ready. On Friday, Jessica brought Sophie Grace back. The little girl ran into Rachel's arms, shouting, Auntie, with all the joy in the world. Emily, she yelled next, hugging the older girl. Are you back to stay? Emily asked. Daddy said I can stay until he fixes everything. A long time. Rachel felt her eyes well up, seeing the happiness of the two girls. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The following months were the happiest Rachel had experienced since Emily was born. Sophie Grace brought new energy into the house, and Emily blossomed in her role as the big sister. Richard visited regularly, always bringing gifts and spending quality time with his daughter. Rachel could see he truly was a devoted and loving father. "How are the divorce proceedings going?" Rachel asked during one of his visits. "Complicated, but progressing. Victoria is doing everything to make it difficult, but the evidence against her is strong. And Sophie Grace doesn't ask about her. No, in fact, she seems happier and more relaxed than I've ever seen her. You've worked a miracle with my daughter." It was true. Sophie Grace had lost that tense, frightened look from the first few days. Now she laughed freely, played without fear, and had settled into a healthy routine with Rachel and Emily. Richard had also changed. He seemed less stressed and more present during his visits. He started taking the girls out for outings, always including Emily as part of the family. "You know, Rachel, these months have made me reflect a lot on what truly matters in life," Richard said one Sunday, as they watched the girls play in the small backyard. "How so?" "I was so focused on growing my business, on accumulating things, that I forgot to enjoy my daughter's childhood. Victoria took advantage of that absence." Rachel nodded understandingly. "But you showed me that happiness doesn't require much. Sophie Grace is happier in this modest house than she ever was in the mansion. Children need love and attention. The rest is just extra." "Exactly. And you gave that to her when you didn't even know me, without expecting anything in return." One day, Richard arrived earlier than usual, looking agitated. "Rachel, I need to talk to you." "Did something happen?" "The divorce is finalized. I got full custody of Sophie Grace." Rachel felt a mix of joy and sadness. She was happy for Richard, but she knew this meant Sophie Grace would go back home. "That's wonderful, Richard. Sophie Grace will be so happy." "She will, but there's one thing. I bought a new house, smaller, cozier. I want to start fresh with my daughter." "How lovely." "Rachel, I'd like to make a proposal. Would you and Emily like to live with us?" Rachel was stunned. "What do you mean?" "Sophie Grace sees you as family. Emily's like a sister to her. And I've gotten used to having you in our lives." Rachel didn't know what to say. "Not as a house cleaner or nanny," Richard continued, "as family. I know it might sound strange, but these months have shown me what it truly means to have a close-knit family." "Richard, You don't have to answer now. Think it over. But know it would be an honor to have you as part of our official family." That night, Rachel talked at length with Emily. "What do you think, sweetheart?" "I'd love it, Mom. Sophie Grace is like my sister, and Uncle Richard is really nice. But you understand it would be a big change in our lives." "I do. But I also know we're already a family, right, Mom? We'd just be living in the same house." Emily's simple wisdom touched Rachel's heart. It was true. They already functioned like a close family. Over the week, Rachel observed their interactions. Richard was respectful and caring, never crossing boundaries. Sophie Grace and Emily were inseparable, and she herself had grown fond of all of them. Richard had never pressured her or shown romantic interest. The proposal seemed genuinely based on the children's well-being and the friendship that had blossomed between them. "Richard, I accept your proposal," Rachel said the following Friday. "Really?" His face lit up. "But with a few conditions." "Name them." "I want to contribute to household expenses as I'm able. I don't want to feel dependent." "Of course, we can discuss that." "And I want to keep working at least part-time. It's important for my independence." "Perfectly understandable. And either of us can reconsider if it doesn't work out. No hard feelings." "Completely agree." When they told the girls, Sophie Grace squealed with joy and jumped into Rachel's arms. "Now we'll be a real family," she exclaimed. "We already were, sweetheart," Rachel replied, hugging both girls. "Now we'll be a family living together." The move to the new house was a special moment. Richard had chosen a 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood, with a backyard and a leisure area. It wasn't a mansion, but it was cozy and perfect for a family. Each girl got her own room, but in practice they slept together most nights, talking and laughing until late. Rachel naturally took on the role of organizing the house, while Richard dedicated himself to being more present in the girls' lives. He had reduced his workload and prioritized family time. Sundays became a tradition. They went on outings together, visited the park, went to the movies, or simply stayed home cooking together and watching films. "Rachel, can I ask you a personal question?" Richard said one of those Sunday mornings while the girls played in the backyard. "Of course. Have you ever thought about getting married again?" Rachel paused, stirring her coffee. "After Carla's father abandoned us, I focused on being a mother and working. There was never time or energy left for relationships. And now? I have a family. I don't know if I need anything else." Richard nodded, respecting her answer. Months passed and the family routine settled in. Rachel had gotten a part-time job at a neighborhood store, Richard worked fewer hours and spent more time at home, and the girls were happy and well-adjusted. Sophie Grace had started preschool, attending the same school as Emily. It was touching to see them walking out hand in hand every morning, looking out for each other. "Mum, at school everyone asks if Sophie Grace is my sister," Emily said one day. "And what do you tell them?" "That she's my sister at heart, which is even better than a blood sister, because we chose each other." Rachel smiled, proud of her daughter's maturity. One day Richard came home with a serious expression. "Did something happen?" Rachel asked. "Victoria filed for a custody review." Rachel's heart froze. "What do you mean?" "She claims Sophie Grace is living in an irregular situation with us, that I shouldn't have strangers caring for my daughter." "But that's absurd." "It is, but she got a hearing. We'll have to prove Sophie Grace is happy with us." Rachel felt fear. What if they lost Sophie Grace? What if they tore apart the family that had become so precious? "What can we do?" "My lawyer says we need witnesses to testify that Sophie Grace is happy and well cared for. Teachers, neighbors, doctors." "She is, Richard. Anyone can see that." "I know. But Victoria has resources and knows influential people." In the following days, tension filled the house. Sophie Grace sensed something was happening, though they tried to keep things normal. "Aunt Rachel, are you sad?" Sophie Grace asked one morning. "A little, sweetheart, but it'll pass." "Is it because of me?" Rachel knelt to her level. "No, my love. It's never because of you. You only bring joy to our lives. I don't want to leave here. And we don't want you to." The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. Rachel was extremely nervous. She had never set foot in a courthouse before. Richard reassured her. "We just need to tell the truth, Rachel. The truth is that Sophie Grace is happy and loved. What if it's not enough?" "It will be. I have faith." On the day of the hearing, Rachel, Richard, Sophie Grace, Jessica, as the social worker, and several witnesses appeared. Sophie Grace's teacher, neighbors, the pediatrician, and even Mr. Wilson from the grocery store. Victoria was elegantly dressed, flanked by two expensive lawyers. She cast disdainful looks at Rachel, as if she were beneath her. The judge, a mature and experienced woman, listened carefully to all sides. Victoria argued that Sophie Grace was being raised by people without means, and that this wasn't suitable for a child from a wealthy family. Sophie Grace needs refined education, language lessons, ballet, piano. These simple people can't provide that, argued one of Victoria's lawyers. When it was the defense's turn, Richard's attorney presented medical reports, school records, and testimonies. Sophie Grace has never been healthier, happier, or better developed. Her academic performance has improved drastically. She no longer has nightmares and she's formed healthy family bonds. Sophie Grace's teacher testified, "She's a completely transformed child. She arrived shy and scared, but now she's communicative, affectionate, and confident. Her family is loving and present." The pediatrician confirmed Sophie Grace is at her ideal weight, with perfect development and stable emotional health. Rarely do I see a child so well cared for. But the most touching moment was when the judge asked to speak with Sophie Grace privately. "Sophie Grace, where do you want to live?" the judge asked gently. "With Daddy, Aunt Rachel, and Emily," Sophie Grace answered without hesitation. "Why?" because they love me. Aunt Rachel sings to me, Emily plays with me, and Daddy isn't sad anymore. And Aunt Victoria. Sophie Grace made a sad face. She yells a lot and says I'm in the way. She doesn't like me. Are you afraid of her? Yes. She said she'd send me away if I wasn't obedient. When they returned to the courtroom, the judge had made her decision. After reviewing all testimonies and observing the child's well-being, I rule to maintain custody with the father, Richard Harrison Brooks, recognizing the formed family as beneficial for the child. Rachel felt her legs tremble with relief. Furthermore, the judge continued, I order that Mrs. Victoria's visits be supervised due to evidence of attempted manipulation and the child's own accounts. Richard squeezed Rachel's hand, both overcome with emotion. On the opposite side, Victoria stormed out furiously, making threats that were immediately reprimanded by the judge. Any unauthorized attempt to approach the child will be considered contempt, the magistrate warned. They left the courthouse as an officially recognized family. Sophie Grace jumped for joy when she learned she wouldn't have to be separated from anyone. Now we're a real family for good, she exclaimed. That night they held a small celebration at home. Emily had prepared a sign that read, Welcome forever, Sophie Grace, with colorful drawings. Rachel, Richard said when the girls had gone to sleep, I don't have the words to thank you for everything you've done for us. We did it for each other, Richard. You've changed our lives for the better, too. You know what amazes me most about you? What? You never hesitated to do what was right, even when it was hard or risky. You protected Sophie Grace when you didn't even know me. You accepted our family when it could have complicated your life. Rachel smiled. Sometimes the heart knows what's right before the mind understands. That's true. There was a comfortable silence between them. Rachel, can I ask you something else personal? Of course. Do you think we could ever be more than a family of convenience? Rachel looked at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. Richard, you're a wonderful man and an exceptional father. Any woman would be happy by your side. But I need to be sure I'm not confusing gratitude with other feelings. And so do you. Richard nodded in understanding. You're right. We have time to figure that out. We do. The following months were about settling in. The family found their rhythm, each contributing in their own way. Rachel had started a small sewing business from home, serving neighbors and acquaintances. Richard reduced his work hours even further to be present. The girls grew up together, living typical childhood adventures, silly fights that lasted 5 minutes, secrets whispered in the dark, shared bonds and mutual care. Mom, can I ask you something? Emily said one Saturday morning. Of course, sweetheart. Do you like Uncle Richard? Rachel stopped folding the clothes. Yes, I do. He's a good person. But do you like him as a boyfriend? Rachel smiled at her daughter's innocent curiosity. Why are you asking that? Because Sophie Grace said she wants you two to get married so we can be real sisters. You already are real sisters, my love. Love doesn't need a signed paper. I know, but it would be cool if you two got together. Why? Because you like each other, you take care of each other, and we're all happy together. Emily's simplicity made Rachel reflect. It was true she had developed feelings for Richard, but she always suppressed them, afraid of disrupting their family harmony. That afternoon, while the girls played in the backyard, Richard approached Rachel. What are you thinking about? He asked, seeing her lost in thought. About the girls, about how they see our family. How so? They want us to be a real couple, Richard smiled. And what do you want? Rachel hesitated. I'm afraid of ruining what we already have. Rachel, can I confess something? Go ahead. I've fallen in love with you, not just because of how you care for Sophie Grace, but because of who you are, your strength, your kindness, your courage. Rachel felt her heart race. Richard, I know you're scared and I understand. I am too, but don't you think it's worth trying? Rachel looked at the girls playing, then at Richard, and felt it was time to be brave again. Maybe it is. Richard moved closer slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted. But Rachel didn't step back. When they kissed, it was like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. "Can I take that as a yes?" Richard whispered. "You can," Rachel replied, smiling. The girls, who had seen everything from the window, erupted in cheers and came running. "Are you getting married?" Sophie Grace asked, bouncing excitedly. "We'll talk about it," Rachel said, laughing. "That means yes," Emily shouted, hugging them both. 6 months later, in a simple backyard ceremony, Rachel and Richard got married. Sophie Grace was the flower girl, Emily was the ring bearer, and Jessica was the matron of honor. The celebration was small but full of love, with neighbors, close friends, and some of Richard's co-workers. "Now we're officially a family," Sophie Grace declared during the grape juice toast. "We always were," Rachel corrected. "Now we just have the signed paper." Years passed, and the family grew in every way. Richard expanded his businesses, but kept a balance with family life. Rachel opened a small children's clothing boutique that became a neighborhood favorite. Emily and Sophie Grace grew up as true sisters, supporting each other through every stage of life. Emily became a responsible and caring teenager, always looking out for Sophie Grace. Sophie Grace grew up secure and loved, with no scars from her traumatic childhood experience. Richard became a father to Emily in every sense, and Rachel became a mother to Sophie Grace just the same. Their blended family worked perfectly because it was built on love and mutual respect. Victoria eventually gave up her attempts to interfere in Sophie Grace's life, especially after several court rulings went against her. She moved to another state and started over. "You know what amazes me most about our story?" Richard said one night as they watched the girls doing homework at the kitchen table. "What?" "How one moment of compassion from one person can change so many lives." "How so?" "If you hadn't stopped to help Sophie Grace in the rain that day, none of this would have happened. She could have been taken by the wrong people. I would have kept being manipulated. Emily wouldn't have a sister. You wouldn't have found you," Rachel finished. "Exactly. One simple decision to do the right thing changed 4 lives forever." Rachel reflected on that. It was true. On that rainy day, when she saw a little girl crying alone, she simply followed her maternal instinct. She never imagined where it would lead. "I guess that's what they call destiny," she said, "or having a good heart that attracts good things." That night, as they tucked the girls into bed, Sophie Grace asked a question she always did when she was feeling especially tender. "Mom, Rachel, do you remember the day you found me in the rain?" "How could I forget, my love? I was so scared and so cold, but when you came, I knew everything would be okay." "How did you know?" "Because you looked at me like I was your daughter, even though you didn't know me." Rachel felt her eyes well up, as they always did when Sophie Grace talked about that day. "It's because you are my daughter, my love, from the very first moment. And I've been your mum forever too," Sophie Grace said, hugging Rachel. From the other room, Emily called out, "Can I join the family hug?" "Of course," Rachel and Sophie Grace answered together. Richard appeared in the doorway, watching the 3 of them cuddled on the bed. "Is there room for one more in this hug?" "Always," Rachel replied. And there, wrapped together on the tiny bed that once belonged only to Sophie Grace, was the family born from a simple act of kindness on a rainy afternoon. Years later, when Sophie Grace was in college and Emily was finishing high school, they wrote an essay together about family for a school contest. Family isn't just about blood or papers. Family is about choosing to love and care for each other every day. Our family began when our mum decided to help a lost child in the rain, not knowing she wasn't just saving a life. She was creating an entire new family. We've learned that love multiplies when shared, and sometimes the best families are the ones that find each other by chance, but stay together by choice. They won first place in the contest. At Emily's graduation party, Richard gave an emotional speech. "When I met Rachel, I thought I was just finding someone to care for my daughter, but really I found a whole family. Emily taught me that being a father isn't about biology, it's about presence and love. Rachel taught me that strength comes from kindness. And Sophie Grace taught me that sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves." Rachel also spoke. That day in the rain, I thought I was helping a lost child. But the one who was me. Lost in routine, in the struggle to survive, forgetting that life can be so much richer when shared with love. Sophie Grace, now an 18-year-old young woman, gave the final words. Family is the home we carry in our hearts. No matter where we are, if we're together, we're home. And I've learned that sometimes angels come as ordinary people, with old umbrellas and giant hearts, ready to save us from life's storms. When the party ended and everyone went to sleep, Rachel and Richard stayed on the porch, watching the stars as they always did during important moments. "Any regrets?" Richard asked, taking Rachel's hand. "None. And you?" "Just one." "What?" "That I didn't find you all sooner." Rachel smiled, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "I think we found each other at the right time, when we were all ready to be this family." "You're right. And now we keep writing our story, one day at a time, always remembering that the love we give comes back multiplied." And so it was that on a rainy afternoon, a simple act of compassion turned into a love story that lasted forever, proving that sometimes the best happy endings begin in the most unexpected moments. The end of the story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If something touched your heart, leave a sincere comment below. Do you believe Rachel made the right choices? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.